Czaplinski with Josh Fisher, and this is CT Pulse. It's Wednesday, February 3rd. This is a show that follows politics, news, and what's trending in the Constitution State. Josh, and we have a lot coming up.
We do, Kate. Today's opening day in Hartford, so Governor Malloy right now is, I believe, just wrapping up his budget address to both houses in the General Assembly. But before that, on Monday, we talked with Tony Hwang, State Senator of Fairfield, about the budget season, about GE, about politics. We even got him to tell us who he's supporting for president on the Republican side. So we're going to be playing that interview today.
Yeah. And later in the show, of course, we'll highlight some of the stories that are grabbing our attention. There's a lot going on, including the New Haven line setting an all-time record for ridership, an off-ice hockey injury causing some commotion and debate in Ridgefield, a high school sexting scandal that shocked many in a quiet community, and a Santeria priest arrested in Bridgeport. That's in our weird news this week.
So, so then later in the show, we're going to have Doug Smith, who will be joining us once again. We're going to talk about, his twisted sense of humor. Speaking of weird stuff, our buddy Doug's going to be in. We're going to look at some more of his rejected cartoons, and then he's going to preview some of his editorial cartoons that are going to be in the HAN Network newspapers out tomorrow.
That's right. But first, let's show you some of our chat on Monday with State Senator Tony Hwang, who represents the 28th District. That includes Fairfield, Newtown, Easton, Weston, and Westport. Check that out right now. We're joined today by State Senator Tony Hwang, a Republican representing the 28th District, which includes Fairfield, Newtown, Easton, Weston, and Westport. Tony, we're so happy to have you in our studio.
Well, it's great to be here, and what a wonderful new show to inform the public.
Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Tony.
And you've been very busy. Over the weekend, you held a meeting with Fairfield area nonprofit leaders talking about GE's move from Fairfield to Boston. What came out of that meeting?
Well, I think it is a reflection of GE, and it sent tremendous tremors throughout the whole state. And we've heard a lot about jobs, taxes, and real estate impact. But one of the things I wanted to do in moving forward was for us to just remember that GE is not simply a corporation that pays taxes and employs people. It is a tremendous philanthropic entity in our community. They contribute in the form of corporate foundations and their money. They contribute in regards to matching funds for each of their employees to the various nonprofit and charities that they participate in. They contribute in the sense of the culture of volunteerism, from their executives to boards to volunteers and retirees. All of that now is going to change. And for me, I felt it was important for us to take a moment to let the community know that our nonprofits are such an integral part of our community, and they help those that are most vulnerable and at risk, that we can't let that safety net be cut. So it was really an opportunity to bring entities like mental health, homelessness, developmental disability and autism, faith leaders from church, and also hospitals. With all the debate about hospital taxation, here's the thing. They're an incredible nonprofit that provide critical healthcare services. So it was also an opportunity for me to remind people that even though I might have had a panel of people, it's a small representation of so many of our nonprofits in our community, right in our neighborhoods, that need help.
Yeah. So how does Fairfield survive? Your hometown of Fairfield survive GE? What are you looking towards the future?
Well, I think the first comments I made on that, as disappointing and as frightening as it might be, Fairfield will be strong and we will have the resolve. One of the charities we talked to, LifeBridge, which was former FSW, has been providing care and services through resiliency for over 161 years. And that's one of the greatness of our community, right? We're having difficult times. There's partisan bickering, there's infighting, there's uncertainty, there's flight concerns. But I think the greatness in our community and our state is the fact that people step up. People understand what needs to be done because we love our community. And I want to be sure that we have every chance to succeed. And I believe we will. But part of it is moving past the partisanship and the not identifying the problem and snickering and bickering back and forth. It's time to move past that, and let's get together and critically focus on what is important. And that is to care for our most vulnerable and at risk, caring for our nonprofits who do all that work, and also moving forward to see how we can create an environment where jobs, businesses, and entities can grow, not forcing them out of our state.
Well, and speaking of that, caring for those who need it here in Connecticut, we're about to hear the governor's latest budget spending proposal for the second half of this biennial budget. Last time when taxes were raised, we saw social services get hurt by the governor's budget. In return, in my opinion, to make sure that some of these state unions didn't have to make any concessions, despite what the governor said when he first ran in 2010 and what he said when he ran again in 2014. How do you, as a member of the minority in Hartford, keep an eye out to help for those most vulnerable? Because they often don't have people, they don't have the big lobbyists in Hartford.
Well, Joshua, you probably might need a 2-hour program for the question you asked. And I know the governor has the legislative figurehead for our state, gets a lot of the criticism, but then he also gets a lot of the attention as well. I think he's not up for review till 2018. But that being said, I think you bring up an interesting point, and rehashing what you said was we had record tax increases and we cut critical social services. It doesn't mesh.
Right.
And I think the first thing people would ask in identifying is, where did all that money go? And we have the debacles in service delivery, the DMV, the criticism of state efficiencies in delivering critical social services, not only from the nonprofits perspective, but deliverable services, our roads, infrastructure, and where's the money going?
Right.
That's a big question. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we have to do as legislators is truly identify how our state government is functioning, what efficiencies we need to build in. We have to treat every tax dollar that we levy on the backs of the people who contribute to our total grand list, to value that like it's our own money as legislators. We don't do that.
So how do we do that?
Well, I think honesty, transparency, and accountability. I think being able to target where our inefficiencies are. And I've cited 3 particular things right off the bat that I think we need to address. One of which is our pension liabilities. We have a escalating, ticking time bomb, in my viewpoint, of a pension liability that we don't see or feel, and it's not in our overall budgeting process, but it keeps on rising. And ultimately, that bill's got to be paid. I think the second critical issue is, how do we create efficiencies in regards to the delivery of critical services? We talk about the cuts to our critical nonprofits, which are truly valuable to me. But at the same time, we have the same areas in the state that provide those services. We have an amazing duality of service delivery in the state of Connecticut that is so rare in this country. So we literally have in the Kennedy Center developmental disability and autism care. The state provides the same service. Right. Even though the state subcontracts close to 75% of those services to the nonprofits, they still have an operating staff, budget, and expense that is there as part of the tax roll. Here's the reality. Those nonprofits do the same work at equal, if not better, at 55 cents on the dollar to the state agencies. Right. Immediate efficiencies, no loss of services. We have to explore that as an option. And I think the third is to bring efficiencies into our government. What's amazing to me is there are 45,000 employees, state employees. We have individual departments in environment, in transportation, in energy. Would you believe they all have their own IT departments? There is no centralization. There is no efficiency built into our government. Each little agency have their own fiefdom, and you know what? It might have worked in the 1920s, but the reality is we don't have the luxury of being able to maintain those independent operating structures. We have to create efficiencies to ensure that we are respecting and valuing every tax dollar.
Right. I mean, and especially for the municipalities, there's been so much of a push to, centralize and regionalize and all of that. So why hasn't that reached Hartford yet?
Well, we had a fascinating conversation this morning. We talked about, this week, we talked with superintendents from this area's region, from Trumbull all the way down to Greenwich and Darien. And one of the things they talked about was special education. Well, one of the big nuances of that is each of our town boards have such a struggle with burden of proof on education. Now, I brought up an interesting point. We talked about regionalization. How about the idea of centralizing special education care? So we don't break into little towns and debates and put incredible burdens on our town education budgets. And one of the colleagues said, well, that would put too much burden on state government. And I kind of chuckled at that because I said, that is really the point, because state government, in the way we operate, detached from really accountability to local pressures and nuances, impose law of one size fits all, and we expect you to deliver what we what we promulgate in legislation. So that's the reality, is we have to be much more sensitive when we enact legislation and not simply think we know it all up in Hartford. Because truly, in most cases, the way we learn is to talk to people in the communities.
And now you mentioned the DMV a little bit, and you have been critical of those software upgrades. You said they cost taxpayers $25 million. Now recently, the DMV commissioner has resigned. I mean, what is going on there that, what do you get a sense of?
I'd served with Senator Ayala and previous Commissioner Ayala, and he did try his very, very best. But I also believe that he went into a situation that was untenable and incredibly hard to manage. And it is a culmination of decision making. We did talk about the lack of centralization, the lack of coherent operational vision in state government. This is an example of it, that we needed to move the DMV to the 21st century in regards to integrating data from licensure to registration, to coordinate that with various other channels of information and documentation. Driver's license and motor vehicle is the crux of information. So the ability to have that access to all the various other agencies to help with law enforcement is really a kind of a panacea idea of data sharing, right? Well, the frustration I had was we chose a vendor that was not the Oracle or SAP or the Googles or even Microsofts of the world. We actually chose a vendor that is more known for Post-it notes. We chose Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, better known as 3M, to implement this software change. No disrespect to 3M and the corporate culture and the ingenuity they have, but it is not in IT engineering and software engineering. So I think that's one of the challenges, is how do those decisions get made? Are they in a context of best practices? Are they engaged in an environment where they're really listening to the experts that we have throughout our state and throughout the nation to create the best and most efficient system? That's one of the biggest criticisms that people have had with government. I talk to people feel the burden of taxes, but people wouldn't feel as bad about the taxes they pay if they thought that the services and the value that they got from government was matching of the money that they paid. Not many people can honestly say that.
I think you're right, and particularly here, I know, in obviously Connecticut where we live, we really see that, whether it's going to the DMV or sitting in traffic on 95 or standing on a crowded train. It feels like, where's my money, my hard-earned money going? Our taxes go up every year, and we've all had to make sacrifices in the private sector, particularly during the Great Recession, and now as we're moving out of it. But it feels like we haven't seen Hartford make the sacrifices needed, whether it's through, like you talked about, having an individual IT director for every single department as opposed to trimming things down. It seems like the only thing that's off the table is changing the employees or the amount of employment in the state.
Well, I think you bring up three very good points that I've had personal experience in, and it's a personal quirk that in sitting in DMV for 6 hours, that you get to a desk and that you get the lack of interest and the disengagement, and you are sitting on a train platform after seeing your fares rise year after year, and to have a disdain of a lack of consideration for the travails that you're going through as a commuter and a contributor and paying a fare ticket, to kind of get the sense that services aren't there, aren't truly accountable to you. And there's that frustration of powerlessness that people feel. It all adds up to that. And I want to bring back that we talk about laws, we talk about mandates. Those are things that we have to do by leadership. But there is also creating a culture of accountability, of awareness, of feeling that, you know, your actions have consequences, and that whether it be negative or positive, that it has an impact on the people that you interact with. We don't do that in some of the feelings with legislative process, where most people feel that legislators / politicians don't listen to them, don't engage them, don't care. And that's translated into that lack of accountability in services, where people are hardworking people. But I got to tell you, even the most hardened of people, even the most encouraging of people who love what they do, if you sit for 9 hours doing the same thing over and over again, I got to tell you, if you so happen to be a customer at that 9th hour, I may not be the friendliest person with you. So we have to change the culture. We have to adapt and create a responsive environment, like you do in the private sector, like you do in the business of reacting to people, because consumers in a private market have choices. And if you don't do that, you don't provide the value-added customer service, you go elsewhere.
Right.
You don't have that choice in state government.
Other than moving maybe down south. Right? I mean, because we do, you know, the study, we see studies come out all the time that, you know, you can rate Connecticut high or low on anything, but we were just recently rated one of the worst states to retire in.
Right.
And I go only like Hawaii was one of the more expensive states. And I mean, I think people would give up some of the expenses to retire to Hawaii versus dealing with, 16 inches of snow here. And I mean, I love Connecticut, but like, what is there, to keep us here? We see people like GE, if a big company like GE could say, you know what, I'd much rather be up in Boston, which used to be known as, one of the biggest taxing states in the nation. What does that tell the average resident about why should I stay here in Connecticut?
Joshua, I think you're absolutely right in that. And one of the things that I've said repeatedly is GE is symbolic because of who they are and the impact that they have. But really, think about this. What chance does a mid-size, small, or sole proprietor business have to be able to impact change if the legislative leadership dismisses and even just ridicule their issues of concern? What chance do they have? Yeah. Again, we go back to the disengagement, the lack of belief and value of people's process in government. So that really is the chilling fact of this. Is GE is one company, one huge philanthropy in our community. But what does that say to a message to what Edna has just said last week about possibly moving to Louisville? What happens to all the other small businesses that you and I know up and down the street that says, I can't afford to do work here? If GE doesn't have a chance, in your mind, as you just said, what chance do they have? They're going to walk with their feet. Now, here's that problem. We are seeing that out-migration, and that is devastating. But the problem is, so we can't go after that, right? And it's indeed troubling, and I'm not a bearer of bad news. I'd rather be a bearer of facts. Right. That in the last 4 months to 6 months, the state of Connecticut has lost nearly $22 billion of taxable worth to some other state. And this is $22 billion with a B of taxable worth. You don't hear anything about that.
Yeah, no, we don't.
They're leaving. We have to listen to the people down on the street, because $22 billion, what does that mean on a tax base? But it's gone.
Yeah.
It's gone. And that is the fear, because to provide important services, to maintain the incredible infrastructure of social services and generosity that we have in our community, and the quality of life and education that we have, you know what? It needs the community. It needs the engaged core to stay put and want to stay and contribute organically.
We're joined today.
That was the first 2/3 of our time with Tony Hwang on Monday, Kate. And I thought it was interesting. I think it's really interesting too what he has to say, which we'll be playing later in the show when we talk more about politics and we look at the presidential race too and the Republican Party. But we did talk in there about the budget today and about how, and I asked the question and made the statement that it seems like there's no sacrifices being asked by state government. Today, Malloy the governor gave his budget speech, which he just wrapped up while we were playing that, that video of our interview with Tony, and he is proposing a 5.75% budget cut to what was originally passed already last year. Connecticut does a budget every 2 years, and usually in an election year, they're working off the previous budget they do after they're elected. This is an election year for all the state reps and state senators. A part of that budget would be cutting jobs of thousands of state employees, some through layoffs, and they're hoping, it looks like many through attrition. So this is a big step, a big day in Connecticut, also because the governor is also proposing of these block grants and taking away some of that power from the legislators of choosing what's in the budget and what's not in the budget. Instead, what Malloy wants, which would give the executive branch more power to propose the way I understand it, the overall amount of money that's going to be spent in a certain category in the budget, and then the executive branch would decide how that money is spent. Not just the governor, it would be department heads, and kind of similar to almost how in our local towns the Board of Finance sets a Board of Ed budget, but can't tell the Board of Ed how much, what to spend it on.
Money on. Yeah.
So,
Right.
so I thought that was, Tony is always a fun guy to talk with because he's
He is. We really, I appreciate Tony. He's he's always out there. At every event,
right.
He
You don't
does a
feel
great
like he
job.
dances around.
No.
You and I were talking about it afterwards,
Yeah.
and sometimes he's a sincere. Not the other people we've interviewed haven't been, but there's a certain sincerity about Tony Hwang. We ask you ask him later on in the show if he has higher aspirations.
Right, but we'll get to that later. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the interesting stories we're following this week and get back to more of our interview with State Senator Tony Hwang coming up on CT Pulse after this.
When you experience a sports injury, you want to get better and fast. Coastal Ortho Express gives you direct access to orthopedic care quickly. Their physicians are fellowship trained in sports medicine at world-class universities and are also team doctors for area football teams. For specialized personal care of sports injuries, go to Coastal Ortho Express. Open Monday through Saturday in the iPark building, 761 Main Avenue in Norwalk, or coastalorthoexpress.com. Coastal Orthopedics, keeping you on the move.
Darien Sport Shop is a unique store because it's a family store. A busy mom can come in with kids in tow and find everything she needs for them, and even find a dress for herself for Saturday night. And if she's in a rush, she can simply go home and order it from us that night. We'll deliver it the next day. The Darien Sport Shop. We're pretty on the outside and amazing on the inside. Conveniently located with free and easy parking at 1127 Post Road, Darien, Connecticut. Or shop us online at dariensport.com.
It's the new year. The to-do list is long and it's easy to feel pulled in many directions at once. Your professional, personal shoppers at Walter Stewart's are ready to check groceries off your list by shopping for you. Save extra time this year and spend it doing more important things. Great food and wine delivered to your home with the same-day service. Shop Stewart's online at stewartsmarket.com.
While there's still a bite out on the water, most anglers have decided to stow the gear for the winter. Just because Mother Nature isn't cooperating doesn't mean you can't see the latest models of all your favorite gear. With 2 convenient locations, it couldn't be easier to get your fix of summer. Boater, beach bum, fisherman, or simply love the New England coast, this is a unique place to shop. The Dock Shop. 51 Tokenique Road, Darien, 609 Riverside Avenue, Westport, or on the web, docshop.com.
Hi, I'm Rob Adams with my good friend Donald Eng, and we're the home team for Nutmeg Sports, Monday through Wednesday at 2 o'clock right here on the HAN Network. We are the place for all things Connecticut sports, so come hang out with us on Nutmeg Sports. Don? They don't call him the best color man in the game for nothing. Nutmeg Sports, 2 o'clock, Monday through Wednesday, right here on the HAN Network.
We're back on CT Pulse. Kate Czaplinski with Josh Fisher. Taking a look at some of the stories we're following this week, Josh. One is a story that was posted a couple weeks ago, but I find very interesting because of the response that it's gotten. It's a story by the Ridgefield Press's Tim Murphy. It's getting some negative responses, calls of helicopter parenting in regards to an off-ice hockey injury for a young player. What happened was there was a 10-year-old player and he was roughhousing with another player, and it ended up he got a hockey stick in the tooth.
It was before they went on
the ice, but the young man, I guess, put the part of his tooth
tough.
in
He's
his
a little
bag.
he's
I was
a good
like,
hockey
he's
player.
a good hockey player. Put it in his bag, and his parents didn't find out about it until they arrived to pick him up, and that's when they saw what had happened, and they were very upset. Now, what's interesting is I think that is obviously a very upsetting thing. Your child went through a whole practice with a chipped tooth. You're probably angry about that nobody noticed it. But I think what upset a lot of people about the story is that these parents reported it to the Ridgefield police, which is interesting.
Yeah.
This is 10-year-old kids, so you're very young. So I definitely understand being concerned about that. And now this was a Ridgefield Amateur Hockey Association practice that this occurred at. And I just thought some of the comments were interesting. I mean, one person wrote, shame on you, off-ice incident leaves youth hockey parents angry and troubled. I'm more angry and troubled by this article being printed. This is helicopter parenting at its worst, a sequence of unfortunate events that should not have been taken this far. As a longtime RAHA parent myself, I do know that the kids fool around while waiting to get on the ice, despite our best efforts to tell them to stop. So that was kind of the theme of the comments. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think that there is this, in our society today, we have to, bring the police and have a legal action whenever something happens. Kids are rough. Now, it's one thing if the kid, did this maliciously,
right,
and the parents think there's a problem and the safety of their child is. But the kid was, and now, granted, too, there still is that, maybe. Kids are supposed to act tough, particularly if they're playing hockey.
Well,
and
that's another part of it is hockey is a violent sport. So are kids then doing that because, that's kind of what they see when they watch professional hockey and even high school hockey.
He wants to have that little, we've had a couple hockey fights break out on the HAN Network this season.
Yeah.
But I do question and wonder, I mean, do we have to bring the police into all these sorts of things?
That's where they kind of lose me on that.
If maybe, the other parents didn't apologize for it or, or they weren't comfortable with how the Hockey Association was handling it. But I mean, the RAHA has a long history and is well respected in Ridgefield.
Right.
When I was a kid in Ridgefield, I didn't play hockey, but I had a lot of friends when I grew up there who played hockey in the RAHA. The kid who was injured too is from South Salem, New York, just over which borders Ridgefield.
So there's been a little bit in the comments of stay out of Ridgefield.
Yeah, stay out of
Which
Ridgefield.
is unfortunate. Go back to that kind of deal.
All the people in Ridgefield who go to Katona to catch the train in New York to go into the city.
Exactly. So it's
or go to Lewisboro after 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night to buy beer.
Now I did see some comments on there accusing Tim Murphy of not speaking to anybody else, and I don't see that as being the case. In fact, he talks to several people within the association. However, nobody it appears wanted to be identified. So
this gets very tough too from a reporter's perspective,
does.
and to all these people will want to talk, but they don't want their names attached, and it's a fine line that we have to as journalists and walk to, particularly in community news, to make sure you keep your sources there and you kind of report the news, but you can't just start reporting everything that someone says and they say don't attach my name to it. I mean, we're not.
That's really tricky and murky.
This isn't a tabloid, and I mean, not that there's anything wrong depending on the story, but if it involves children and all those sorts of things, I think. But it's also interesting. I like it when someone's outraged that this article was even printed.
Yeah. All right, we like comments.
Outrage.
But moving on to another story we're following now. This was very disturbing for a quiet community. 3 Newtown high school students were arrested and accused of involvement in a sexting ring that circulated sexually explicit images and videos of other students, sometimes for money. Last May, students began transmitting sexually explicit images and videos on cell phone text messaging apps such as Snapchat, FaceTime, etc. Another 20 students have been referred to a community-based juvenile review board, which delivers a consequence on the juvenile aged offender, yet keeps the juvenile offender out of the state of Connecticut criminal justice system. Interesting story there, really disturbed a lot of people. And what I found interesting this week is on our HAN Network websites, we ran an interesting opinion piece on what happened in Newtown from Yvonne Zucco, the executive director of the Center for Sexual Assault Crisis Counseling and Education. She writes in part that, this is a common issue now. I mean, there's a lot of young people sexting each other. And I think what's important that she notes is how, this might be disturbing to adults, but part of this is kind of normal exploration, like kids hiding Playboy magazines under their bed or something. However,
Technology has just changed.
Technology has changed everything, and the one thing as parents that you have to do is discuss the consequences of this when that gets out there.
And that's a really interesting point too, I think, Kate, because all the adults, us, who are looking at this, we didn't have cell phones like we have now. We didn't have, we couldn't certainly send images so easily to each other. So it's a completely different world, and kids are naturally going to be interested in exploring, all this sort of stuff. That's what being a teenager is kind of about, all about.
And I mean, I think we've heard about it again and again, kids being bullied and embarrassed after maybe sending something like this and it getting disseminated among.
Oh, it's terrible, but it's also a good lesson. And I think it's good too that this is done in a separate, the juvenile thing, because a kid could do this, and then you could get labeled as a sex offender, and that could really ruin your life for doing something kind of silly, not to lessen what it is in high school.
But definitely, if you're on one of our community news sites, check out this post by Yvonne Zucco, because she gives some tips on, as a parent, how to handle that situation. So very interesting there. And I know, Josh, you were interested this week in Metro North.
I'm always interested in Metro North.
You are, because you're a commuter.
Yes. Not as much as I used to, since now I have to come up here to Shelton, where our studio is. But and I did ride the train last night, which was very convenient. Showed up on time, got me where I wanted to go, and got me back home nice and safe last night. But ridership is up on every single New Haven line. Except the New Canaan line, which I found interesting. And it's the New Haven line is the busiest single line commuter line in the nation. And so ridership has gone up on the main line, on the inner line, which is what they call the space between Grand Central and Stamford. So that includes all the Westchester stops that it makes. And then also on the Waterbury line, which is rarely running. So it's interesting that ridership is up on. And then on the Danbury line too. But on the New Canaan line, it's down, which the New Canaan line is the best served of the branch lines. They have a train that leaves at least once an hour. Several more in the morning that leave New Canaan, and then during rush hour, there are several more that come in, which the other lines don't. The Danbury line, it's like maybe every 2 or 3 hours, and so. It's interesting that that's down, because the New Canaan line is actually the most convenient one. You still can get into the city in about 60 minutes from New Canaan. If you're catching the train from Danbury to go into the city, it's an over 2-hour ride. It's a long ride.
That is a long ride. And I know it was interesting that a lot of non-commuter travel.
Yeah, well, see, that's what I did last night. I went to go see a concert at Capitol Theater in Port Chester, and it's so easy to hop on the train in Stamford, where I live, and then just take it down to Capitol Theater is right across the parking lot from the train station. And it's an easy thing to do. You don't have to worry about, driving, you don't have to worry about drinking, anything like that. And there were a lot of people when we were catching the train to come back. There were a lot of people who all, who were doing the same thing. So
it's that's the best when you have something, a concert like that to go to.
But one thing though that I think is important about this is also it's curious. The state legislature likes to act like it's just the Wall Street guys who are riding the train in the morning. Going into the city, which is not true. There's certainly a number of them, but there's a lot of people who don't have cars that that commute just within the state, and a lot of different service industries that we have. So it's important, and if you look at what the governor's, how one of the ways that his committee wants to support his billion-dollar, what is it, $100 billion, how big is that transportation plan? I can't remember offhand, so I apologize. But is to raise the fares again. We've had the 1% hike every year since the new trains came on.
Jim Cameron was talking about that on Coffee Break.
Right, yes.
On Talking Transportation.
So it's important, but it's also, not only is the New Haven line the busiest commuter line, it is one of, if not the most expensive commuter line in the nation. And it's also unfair for Connecticut because it's operated by Metro North, but it's owned by the state of Connecticut, but Connecticut does not have a voting seat on the MTA board, which New Jersey does. And so something to, but kind of good news for trains, and that could be the best way to fix our transportation problem. If you widen the highways, it's just going to be more cars are going to be on the highways. That's not going to fix anything. What else?
Well, just one final, some weird news, because we have to talk about that. Bridgeport police made an unusual arrest yesterday involving a Santeria priest that was practicing, allegedly, the dark arts. The Connecticut Post reported that Felix Cuba Delgado, who was being sought by Massachusetts police for grave robbing, was arrested Tuesday afternoon, but officers weren't prepared for what they found in his Hallett Street basement. They found 2 human skulls and bones that appear to have come from the remains of 2 people. And now, interestingly, the neighborhood that he's in, according to Bridgeport police, there is a large population from Puerto Rico and the West Indies where that religion is practiced, and they were afraid to say anything against Delgado for fear he would put a curse on them. Now, it's obviously just a very unusual story and kind of grabbed our attention just to talk about. Obviously, this day and age, you don't hear so much about these things anymore, but
no.
The idea of
Are you
somebody
afraid that
having,
you're going to get a curse put on you for talking about this?
A little bit.
Yeah.
We're all a little superstitious,
Make sure
right?
I hope you parked far away from me when you start that car up.
But that was just some of the stories we're following this week. There's a lot going on, and we have more right now on our Talk with Tony Hwang. We asked him a few questions. We asked him about presidential politics. We asked him about his future aspirations.
Yeah.
So let's check that out. Now, Tony, we do have to say we're here on Monday. We're recording this interview on the morning of the Iowa caucuses, the first major voting event of the 2016 presidential election. Who are you supporting for president? We have to ask.
I've had the incredible privilege and honor of spending some time with Ohio Governor John Kasich. And what he has done as a governor to change a state that had experienced double-digit unemployment, inflationary cost, crushing labor cost, crushing pension liabilities, a malaise of out-migration. So one of the reasons I did was to reach out and meet with him and say, how did you make that transition to a state now that is vibrant, crossing industries and growing businesses and creating 400,000 new jobs and building up and lowering taxes, but still providing critical healthcare, Medicaid, social services, and creating an environment that is sustainable and organic. And what he really did say was quite interesting and inspiring is people have to be honest with each other, and we have to work together in a bipartisan basis. He said, I may not agree with everything people have put forward. I believe in my values. I'm going to work really hard and listen to yours. That's the kind of leadership we need in our country, that demonstrated experience, demonstrated willingness to work across bipartisan basis. But here's the biggest challenge. He's actually somewhat boring.
Well, he's reasonable.
And boring's not working in this this time around.
When you are in the political process, you need to have people who are bombastic, inflammatory, and sucking the air out of a room. And that doesn't translate to governing, in my opinion. It doesn't translate to engaging and incorporating opposing viewpoints. The greatness of our state and of our country is contributions from so many different viewpoints. Contributions to making ourselves better through collaboration and deliberation and debate. So I support Governor Kasich. I know that it's very tough in this news cycle where you rather taunt somebody and insinuate someone's good or bad, but let us go back and govern and take care and listen to the needs that we have. So you're one of the first people to ask me of that, and I've been supporting Governor Kasich since the first couple of times I met him in September and October. But you are the first organization that I've publicly said, thank you very much, Kate.
All right.
All right,
All
that's
right.
exciting.
And that is my rationale.
But and we got to get going here. But I want to ask you. But someone like John Kasich, who I think is, would actually have a good chance of winning the national election. Would be good for the state of Connecticut to have someone like that at the top of the ticket when everyone goes to vote this year. I think it would help the General Assembly some. But then last week we had on John Shaban, who said he supported Chris Christie, was the guy he liked. And I was thinking about that this weekend. I'm like, I liked Chris Christie too, but then he basically sold out to the far right in hopes of getting some votes to run for president. And so is that the type of guy that I would want to be my president, let alone be the nominee of the Republican Party? No, because it seems like he's just going to go, which, that's what Ted Cruz does too. So how hard, though, is it for you as a Republican in a blue state that Connecticut is? We can give up and stop calling this a purple state because we haven't elected a statewide Republican since 2006, I think. So how hard is it as a Republican in this state to be a Republican when you have people like Ted Cruz and those types out there getting all the attention?
I'm very proud to be a Republican. I'm even more proud to be an American. And I bring that experience in the context of being an Asian American who had the incredible privilege to immigrate and live the American dream. So I think that's where the conversation needs to move to. We need to move to the fact of who represents the values and actions that we can believe in again, that we can help us move forward in bridging gaps. The party system allows people to disengage from thoughtful deliberations. And I think that's really the crux. I would ask anyone who wants to support a candidate, from Bernie Sanders to the reincarnation of Ross Perot, which will tell me how old I am. But I would ask anyone, whether someone who is 75, 55, or 15, that if you're going to support someone, why? To be able to articulate the reasons and the examples that individual inspired you to believe in that engagement. That is the true telling point. And I have to tell you that I took it very seriously in my support of Governor Kasich. One of the biggest challenges I had to him directly was he is deeply faithful. He has very conservative social viewpoints. And one of the things he shared with me, and I said, look, I believe in pro-choice. I believe in marriage equality. I believe in the separation of church and state. And I said, your faith is quite evident in your conservative values. He says, how does that engage in how you govern? Because as a Connecticut Republican, I value those type of values. And he looked at me and he said, look, my social values are important to me. They guide me. But until we have economic sustainability, unless we have independent destiny of what we do as a state and as a country, all the social mores are somewhat gratuitous and distractions, because then we truly don't control our own destiny. If we don't control our fiscal policies to create more organic sustainability and growth, we will have to depend our politics on what the next bondholder from another country tells us what to do. That is not what America's greatness was built on. It was built on the fact that we have a sense of independence, a sense of our ownness that we should never relinquish. And if we don't build up economic sustainability, he said, look, all the other stuff makes us feel good. But you know what? It doesn't buy you a house.
Right.
Doesn't buy you an education. It doesn't do all the things we need to do to create an environment for American greatness. Boy, did you step into that.
I know.
I like it.
We like it, yeah.
I like your answer a lot.
And Tony, before we let you go, There's been a lot of talk 2018 gubernatorial race, who the GOP might run. Is it something you would ever consider?
Look, it's an incredible privilege, and thank you. And it's an honor to be talked in those viewpoints. But isn't that what we get back to as a solid core early? We have so many different challenges at hand right now. If we focus on what we have to do right now and not look 3, 2, or even 1 year ahead, wouldn't we be better serving the constituency that elected us? So I will answer, it's a great privilege to have those kind words, and it's an incredible honor to think that we could serve at a greater level. But to me, I already have an incredible honor to serve the 28th district, to be able to articulate and represent in a viewpoint that says, I'm not only representing Republican, or Democrats, I represent people in my district. And that is what we have to really focus on. And the rest will take care of itself.
All right, State Senator Tony Hwang, thanks so much for joining us. And we will be back right after this.
I really wanted something that felt like a home. Coming from a big house, I wanted the feel of a home as opposed to a condo. The construction is incredible, whether it's the floors, the fireplace, the moldings, the lighting. It's as peaceful as my home was in the middle of the woods. It feels like a house. It does not feel like a condo or a townhome. I feel like I'm in my house.
Find over 1,000 special stories at Hospital for Special Surgery. Go to hss.edu/backinthegame.
I was jogging 5 months after my cartilage tear.
Skiing a year after hip surgery.
And playing grandma 4 weeks after hip replacement.
One special hospital, 1,000 special stories. See Connecticut patients at hss.edu/CT.
I'm Kate Czaplinski. Join us for Coffee Break, weekdays at 11 to get the latest Connecticut news, weather, high school sports, and more. News doesn't get any more local than on Coffee Break on the HAN Network.
You are watching the HAN Network, and you're not alone. Nearly 500,000 viewers enjoyed our broadcasts in the first 5 months. Advertise on the network that reaches Fairfield County, Connecticut's most engaged audience. Contact Jessica Murrin, Advertising Director, at 203-273-7312 or email jessica@han.network.
And we're back on this February 3rd edition of CT Pulse on the HAN Network. I'm Kate Czaplinski with Josh Fisher, and be prepared to perhaps be slightly offended. We're joined now by our editorial cartoonist, Doug Smith.
And you have to show my face when you say offended.
This week, where is Cartoon Doug this week? We have to find out where he is drawing conclusions. This is a weekly segment. It's number one. It's a weekly segment where there he is. Cartoon Doug has painted drawing conclusions on a church. How could you, Doug?
I know, sacrilegious.
Wow.
But so, Doug, let's get into some of your cartoons this week. You've given us a bunch of rejected ones, but let's just roll into it. I know Eric has a lot of your cartoons up there. Now, tell us about this one.
Well, this was the story in Milford this week was about the exotic dancers suing
filing a class action lawsuit
for unpaid wages. And this was the initial sketch I did, and that was that I tried to do the joke like some gentleman's club, well, you're hardly ladies, and then I felt terrible about that because who the heck am I to decide?
Right.
I mean, that's just their living. They're hardworking, and so I just scratched that one and
and you
redid
did the
that
next one.
So
So you have the lawyer for the ladies doing
exactly.
a little move, which,
Yep.
by the way, that is an art form. That is really hard to do what he's
It
doing
is.
right there. I think Joe Forlano even gave us an animated version
He did.
of this. Oh, boy.
There we go.
Yep. And, just to give some folks some details on it, according to this lawsuit, they're saying the owners of keepers withheld some wages from these women. And I give them credit for filing the lawsuit because a lot of times this is a business you might not want you have a stage name, maybe you don't want your real name out there. Good for them.
Public
Fight
record.
for it.
And
Get that money, if it's been withheld from you. So good for them. What else do we have
Good for
this
you,
week,
Doug. That was a good cartoon.
Charter. Oh, we love talking about charters.
Oh, this
What's
was last
this one
week. You were
about?
mentioning about Musto and Herbst having words.
Yes, having
And-
words over the
and-
charter. That's right.
So is this just sort of a back and forth?
Yep. The Poor Town Charter. Look how stressed out it is. It's always used. It's always brought up in trouble for people's
I wonder, does Tim Herbst have a copy of the town charter on his nightstand?
Who doesn't? And I noticed you got a lot into the rail trail this
Well, this
week.
is an ongoing thing, and this was they just had a meeting in Ridgefield about this last week, and the whole thing is just, it's the only rail trail, I guess, on the East Coast that doesn't allow bicycles.
Which is very odd.
Yeah.
I know.
So these are just the past 2 years of cartoons dealing with the rail trail, just in a succession.
Right, and I've been seeing that, I love this one. I love that they've been following this recently, the Ridgefield Press, about some new talks to finally allow bikes on the rail trail. Oh, geez.
It is. Now, one reason why, and haven't followed, is why they might not allow it, is it is a steep hill for much of it.
Oh,
and you could see a toddler getting taken out by a bike or something going cruising down there. I do like you used the Battle of Ridgefield in there because there was actually a Revolutionary War Battle of Ridgefield.
Exactly. Which they recreate every couple of years.
Yeah,
or so.
yeah, kind of neat.
All right, let's get into the rejects. Now, these
They're
are
rejects.
rejects from over a bit of time.
Yeah.
So let's check out the first one there.
This is from New Canaan, the New Canaan Advertiser, and at the time, I guess they were doing a special on the Glass House, and I guess the editor just didn't want to be. It's a big deal to Ridgefield, the Glass
It
House.
is,
It's
yeah,
their
the Philip
cultural
Johnson Glass
attraction,
House.
and this was just sort of making light of their precious Glass House and just making it look
At
like
least you don't have to live in
it's
fear
just
of
a cube.
baseballs. I love it. I think it's great. Now, tell us about this one.
This
what
was
town
from
is
the.
this?
This was actually from the Valley Gazette paper, which ended a year or so ago, and that was about a gentleman who was writing in letters on behalf of the ADA and said that he couldn't drive anywhere in town with his wheelchair because of the condition of the streets.
Right. And so really here you have the ADA represented as a person in a wheelchair, but you're more, I could see why people on the face of it might get worried about that, but
Well,
you're really criticizing the town
Exactly.
for
And
not
they
fixing
didn't,
something.
in the town, it just I guess their hands were tied at the time. I don't know what the situation was, but I just said they just spent the money on a new street lamp. And we
Right.
just didn't want to give them a hard time about that.
I understand that. But in that cartoon, like I said, it's
Yeah.
more like you're giving a hard time.
I did send that cartoon to the gentleman in the wheelchair who loved it.
Oh, yeah.
Great.
That's kind of weird, though. It's like, well, you guys just did spend all this money on this really nice street lamp.
Yeah.
We don't want to
We
fed
don't
the
wanna-
three people
Exactly.
who raised money for the street
Well,
lamp.
let's go back to the next rejected one that we have up. Now, I noticed you've blanked
I
out
do,
whoever this is.
and that's why they didn't want to run it, because it was a sore point with this politician at the time. I don't recall what town it was in, but it was
Okay.
something about he wouldn't shake hands with people. And
Which is
I
unusual
remember. I
for
kind
a
of think
politician.
that was it because out of fear of passing germs.
I
And
don't recall. I just remember people were writing into the paper saying they were teed off, that he wouldn't shake their hands, so I just did that as his nightmare, giant hand, coming in and getting them.
Now, the next one, Doug, I'm trying to remember if I rejected these as Trumbull Times editor.
Yeah, I believe because...
And I don't know why. I wish I could remember my reasoning.
Because somebody was injured and there was a bleacher
Yes,
collapse and
yes.
some kids got hurt.
you were
and we
editor
just-
then.
I was editor then.
It's not really something to make light of.
Right. I think, we were
Yeah.
worried about the kid getting hurt. Those bleachers collapsed at a baseball game, actually, that
Right.
the HAN radio at the time was covering, so we had some live audio from that.
Just one of the many times that Kate Czaplinski has suppressed free speech.
Yep, that's what I'm all about. That's what I'm all about. All right, let's go to the final reject. Doug, you want to explain this one?
And no, that's not me. But that was going to be the universal cartoon for most of the papers this week. And I just got a story out of the paper last week, order your Girl Scout cookies, and then someone informed me after this month, it's over. So it wouldn't make sense, just for that simple reason.
Doug, you're awesome, as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You'll be
Doug.
joining us, of course, next Wednesday. Doug will be back for Drawing Conclusions, showing us some more of his editorial cartoons, rejects, and ones that are running in our papers this week. But Josh, that does it for this week's episode.
We did. We made it.
We made it.
Third time.
And you can watch us on demand later.
You can watch us on demand later, shortly after this is over. Kate will post it on HAN.network. And we'll start looking towards next week.
Start planning for next week. All right, that does it for CT Pulse. We'll see you next Wednesday. Have a great day.